The epidemic of AIDS took us by surprise as it went from a few cases to thousands in just a few years. Here's Emily Gordon telling us how she jumped into working with AIDS children and their parents in the early 80s.
I'm Emily Gordon. I have a master's in social work, and this is just a small part of my life, but a very significant one. I started my own nonprofit in New York working with HIV positive children when they were being discriminated against a whole lot, and I was affiliated with an organization called ACT UP, AIDS Coalition Unleash Power. That was in the early 80s.
And when did the AIDS epidemic really get?
Apparently, when I was in Europe having a great vacation and I came back to New York, I was invited to a lot of memorials of people that I barely knew, and I was working in an agency that had foster parents and children with HIV also, and I kind of jumped in with both feet, and the only thing that saved me is that I was in ACT UP and I got a lot of helpful guidance from some of the guys, with the exception of the fact that the media had kept saying that HIV positive children were innocent victims and everybody else was a bad person because they probably got it through sex.
Tell me about ACT UP.
ACT UP was an organization that I discovered as soon as I got back. It was started, if you believe Larry Kramer, it was started by Larry Kramer and gay guys. Koch was the mayor, and they couldn't get anyone to pay attention to the fact that people were dropping like flies, and there was no treatment, and it was a very hush-hush thing. So they decided to bring it down to Wall Street and have demonstrations and educate the community. And by the time I found ACT UP, it was one of the first gay pride parades, and I saw this guy and I said, "Where's ACT UP?" He said, "Oh my God, you want them too? I've been looking for them. I can't even find them." So together we found it, and I found a group of people that were not ashamed of having HIV and AIDS, but wanting to help others and stop the death that was happening. I got involved because when I came back from Europe, I called my friend who happened to be gay, and Michael, and I said, "Michael, how are you doing?" He said, "I have a drama in my life and I don't want to taint you with it, so I don't plan to be friends with you anymore." And I said, "That's ridiculous." So then I started talking to people, and I realized that he was probably HIV positive, and he thought that I would reject him as a friend because he had been diagnosed. Okay, I had two roles. Number one, I joined as an activist. I was proud to join, happy to join, and when I went to work, I found that I was working at Covenant House, and we had pregnant and parenting adolescents coming in, and I found that there were girls that had HIV positive babies, and they got diagnosed through the baby being born. They had no idea they had the virus, and that was one of my first cases. And I'm usually very proud of being a social worker, but I was really ashamed of the people I had to work with, because I volunteered to take the first girl's case with her 3-year-old, and they wouldn't, people wouldn't even talk to me about what I was doing as a therapist. They were just saying, "Oh God, I'm going to go to lunch because I heard her client is coming. I don't want to breathe the same air." They were completely misinformed, and it was awful. And what happened is from that one girl, I found more, and I worked for the health department, and ACT UP just started this, and I ended up meeting a child whose father had just died, whose mother was positive, and Amir, I did a home visit, and Amir was wonderful, and he actually wanted to be with Amelia, and he wanted to be out there, and because he understood on some 5-year-old level that this was a crisis and there was a possibility of him dying. There were 2 teenage sons that were involved, and the sons were just in mourning for their father and not even willing to look at the fact that the mother and the baby brother might be gone too. And if somebody got in the hospital, they wouldn't even go to the hospital to sit. ACT UP people were staying in the hospital. What I did is I worked with ACT UP. They had various committees, and most of the committees were focused on medical things, and they were meeting with doctors, and they were researching. People were just trying to save their lives. And I went to them and I said, "You guys are going to all these conferences. I have literally in my hand a group of 15 to 20 parents, and they want to be involved, but they've taken care of kids and their health isn't very great, and there's a conference coming up in DC that's on pediatric HIV, and we need money to get there. And ACT UP said, oh, well, we'll put you at the end of the agenda because there's a lot of people in this room that are mad about the innocent victim thing. I had a mother come. We were there until 11 o'clock one night, and Lydia got up there and she said, we need this amount of money to go to this conference and do what you've been doing for several years now, educating yourself and trying to impact the medical care. And we got it. And we went to DC. 6 mothers went, mostly foster parents, 2 natural mothers. As soon as we got there, we went into a medical conference, and it was the same old thing. It was all social workers and nurses and doctors. The lights were out, and they were giving a very medical presentation. And my people came right out, and they said, Emily, we're stupid. We don't understand a thing the doctor's saying. And I said, you will. We're going to educate ourselves. We're going to have a meeting at 7 o'clock. So at 6 o'clock, I was sitting at a dinner table, and this doctor said, Emily, do you know this Lydia woman? I think she's one of my clients. I said, she is one of your clients. She goes to Bronx Lebanon. You're the doctor, Dr. Wiesnia, and she's a very intelligent and beautiful person. You should be talking to her more. And he said, oh, okay. He couldn't make the switch from client, from doctor to equal person trying to stop an epidemic. And I went to the parents and I said, this is how ACT UP usually does it. While the doctors are drinking and sleeping and partying, waiting for the next part of the conference, they sit around and they figure out how we can make an impact. And one of my best foster parents who had 3 HIV positive kids looked at me and said, Emily, do you have any idea that it's the first time in years I've ever been alone in a hotel room? My kids don't have the phone number. I'm physically exhausted. I'm not going to any planning meetings. We'll just have to take it as we can because our energy level is down. ACT UP provided the money for us to get there.
Not to get there, but what do you hope to achieve by going there?
I wanted to educate the parents in terms of speaking up. ACT UP was very good at speaking up. These guys that had formed this, they could call everybody's doctor and say, hi, Dr. So-and-so, it's Brett, you met me through so-and-so, and what's this thing about AZT and when are we going to get it?
How did your group handle AZT when it became available?
They were not getting medical help until they spoke up.
What happened in one of the hospitals was, to me, the saddest thing in the world. They started this clinical trial on a thing called IVIG, immunoglobulin therapy, and they brought the parents in that are already diagnosed kids, and they said, sign the paper, we're not going to explain anything to you, but just sign the paper and you'll get help. And it turns out half of them didn't get anything, but in order to do the follow-up and continue to get the treatment, they had to walk the kids through the drug program. And the parents were not stupid, and the kids weren't stupid, and they saw themselves, why am I going through this methadone clinic? Why am I relegated to the...
They were giving them the same treatment as they would the
Methadone is terrible.
Yeah, well, it was the clinic that they were forced to walk through, which was large, in order to get to the teeny-weeny, itsy-bitsy teeny-weeny medical clinic that was their clinic. The kids were like, we don't want to go in here, Mommy. What happened? Where's the doctor? You know, this is not a pediatric clinic. And it was so painful for Mrs. Grant to have to say, I'm trying to save your life, and you have to walk and just don't look at anybody. Because they were from poor neighborhoods that had already seen drug users. Things like that. When we came back, we made a presentation.
To whom?
To ACT UP, and I got some media on it. And coincidentally, I changed jobs at the same time because I left Covenant House and I went to the health department, and they were getting calls about kids that were not allowed to go to school. And the calls were focused on, why can't my child go to school? And I got a call from a mother who had taken her 4-year-old son into this black church in Brooklyn forever. And when she felt strong enough to tell the minister, you know, I want you to know that I'm so glad I'm a member of your church because he might die, the minister freaked out and said, oh, okay, he's out of the child care program. We'll allow him to go to the church and sit next to you. But you know, their lives just complain every time they disclosed anything. So what happened was, during that period of time, one of my favorite clients' daughter died, and I helped her with that. After that, some kids came to that funeral, and they all knew they were positive if they were maybe over 5 years old, but it was a real fine line. I went to a funeral one time where half of the funeral knew that the mother had died because of HIV and the other half didn't. And I had to walk a very careful line to not disclose, because disclosing is a very emotionally and medically loaded thing. I also found that my kids were desperate to make friends, and their whole social thing was being cut out. There was only one organization that was in Brooklyn that worked with HIV positive children, and the focus was making quilts for their deaths.
Now, did you know about any of the other pediatric AIDS programs? I know there was one in Duke Hospital, for example.
I was lucky to get any contact for 5 boroughs here. Mm-hmm. When I decided I might want to get my PhD and come down here, somebody on the phone asked me, what would you write your thesis on? And I said, well, right now I'm involved in pediatric HIV work. And the woman said, they don't have that here. I said, of course they have it. It's all over the country. How could you not have it here? But the school, this was the mid-'80s.
Mid-'80s, okay.
The School of Social Work did not want anybody to even talk about it. In terms of communication, the problem we had in New York is that everybody was told to go to the Gay Men's Health Crisis. Nobody went. Gay Men's Health Crisis was not prepared to provide any counseling for a mother or a father or a child, a teenager even. But basically, Gay Men's Health Crisis was rich white guys that pretty much had worked in tech and administrative things and found out they had the virus, and they left to become activists because they wanted to save their lives. So people wouldn't do that. But because I started Just Kids Foundation, which is known as all children should be able to go anywhere and live to their fullest potential. Just kids are, HIV positive children are just kids like everyone else. I was able to get some resources from GMHC. It took me 3 years to start having parties, to put out a newsletter to the people that were being referred by the different hospitals. The hospital social workers loved me because I was free from the health department to go to people's homes and give them blow by blow of what's happening and what isn't happening and things to watch out for, because as a client, what happens is if you go to a social worker's office, you say one thing, but if someone comes to your house, you get a better picture of everything that's going on, and it's very important.
How much money did you raise, and how did you spend it?
We raised, I never counted the money we got from ACT UP, and we went to 2 international conferences, so maybe that was 10, 12,000, and my organization, which was a fledgling organization, had 4 members on the board, we got about 12,000. If we were going to an international conference, the group self-selected who could go. They went for daycare or childcare 24 hours if the mother was going for 3 or 4 days. Christmas parties, spring parties, birthday parties. We tried to do everything to make this a place where people wanted to be and where they could relax enough to not worry about, oh my God, my child, who's my child talking to? I hope they don't say they're positive because we'll get thrown out, and that's what was happening.
Did you have a special place where the group met?
We started out meeting at Gay Men's Health Crisis on a Sunday at 10 o'clock when the only group that was there was the AA group. So my parents came up dragging the kids, and about 500 people were coming out. And they went, is there a problem in this community? They gave us free space. I got some of the people that were very intelligent about medical things to come in and talk to the parents and try to do a quick, this is what a clinical trial is supposed to be, and you're supposed to have not just signed the paper, you're supposed to be informed. You're supposed to know that you can get out of it anytime if it's not working for you. Nothing came. Nothing came from that clinical trial. IVIG was no good at all. But at the same time, ACTIP was refocusing on trying to get AZT. And the medical community, pediatric especially, was focusing only on getting to the mothers, because if we could stop the virus spreading, you know, you can die, but if we can give you some kind of drug so your baby won't die, that's what our goal is. You're going to die. You were a drug user. You know, you had unsafe sex with your husband. It's all right if you die. One of the things that was challenging to me was finding resources for people that were in the group. Like Roger wanted to have his son go to a bar mitzvah because it was time. And he'd already lost his wife. And he had called all over and he couldn't find any kind of synagogue. And he didn't have any money. He was on disability himself. He couldn't find any synagogue that would let him go in, because if he told one rabbi, they would call the other ones and say, watch out for Roger. You know, it took almost 3 months to get anything like that. I didn't go to the bar mitzvah myself because I was in conflict because somebody was in the hospital. But he studied, you know, his son studied. He did everything right. And they didn't go to the synagogue to study, you know, they did in a person's apartment. As we grew larger, we had parties and we had community education in each borough. Unfortunately, that didn't stop children from dying. And that was very difficult on everybody. And Amir was growing up, be hateful of people with AIDS, and then when I asked him to do another picture in about 3 years, he chose the gun. We had junior high and high school kids. We had some people in ACTIP that helped us do fundraisers. It was wonderful. We had swimming fundraisers and things like that. We had mothers, foster mothers were very nice with reaching out. We went to protest against Bush. We protested in Manhattan. I became very close with one of my friends, Phyllis's daughter, Suchi. And what happened was, Phyllis went to DC and she told me, she said, do you know, I've gotten off of drugs because I was scared to death at this point. So Phyllis told me, and I'm not making this up, this was such an empowering experience. I want to go buy some gorilla suits. Is it all right for us to not wear the t-shirts? Can we just wear the gorilla suits and bring the child? I said, sure, we have demonstrations that people do bring the children. One of my best friends was half Indian and half American, and her husband was black. Now, he infected Kwan, and of course she had no idea. And Kwan infected her daughter. She decided that she wanted to work with that Indian heritage, American Indian heritage, and she got very involved in sweat lodges and things like that, and she opened up a lot of people's heads. I was able to get people to actually come in the Bronx and Brooklyn and every place but Staten Island to do community education. We had parties, and it was wonderful because we brought in some of the fathers that had been separated because it was such a powerful thing. It was perfect for the kids. There was a father that hadn't seen his son who was positive, but he came in. And when we went to find Bush's house and demonstrate, it took all day, but we found him, and people were really happy. And that, you want to know how bad it was? We got a bus, a yellow school bus to take us. The driver got lost. And there were like maybe 10, 12 parents and a couple of kids on the bus along with the ACTIP people. And the driver is like, I'm lost. I said, you can't get lost. These people have never made it to this area, and we're going to a demonstration. This is major. Yes?
When did you actually move down here?
I moved down in 2001. At that point, I was exhausted. Parents had gone in different directions. The board was disintegrating because they wanted to get, like Magic Johnson put out a call for request for proposal. Roger, the father, came to me and said, oh, look, you can write a proposal, Emily. I said, have you opened this and looked at it? They want 5 years of tax receipts from the bank. You know, you don't just, nobody just gives you money. They give it to established places. But we were running out of money and people were being diffused. I had My friend Michelle brought her daughter to the Smithsonian, and they did things, you know, about Michelle and her daughter. It was just, I felt like we had done a lot, but there was nobody else to take over, and the people were just going in different directions.
Did you know when the medicine AZT started to become available?
That was a gigantic problem. Most of my parents, the women who were positive, they did not want to take the AZT. We had a pediatric specialist that was young and very motivated toward drugs. And that doctor came and spoke to them 3 times and said, "This is going to save your children's lives." They said, "We've been living with this virus for about 6, 7 years now, and we feel terrible, and how do we know you're not going to give us something that will cause our baby to not even be born or have many, many deformities?" They didn't want to do it. And there was a conflict because the pediatric consultant, Eric, went back and told ACT UP, he said, "I don't think this group is a good idea. We should just let them come to meetings if they want to come," which meetings started at 7 and ended at 11, you know, and Emily just is listening to the parents, and she's not listening to the doctors. Interestingly enough, in a history thing, someone came down here and interviewed me, and the one question that they really wanted to know about was, why was I so against AZT? I wasn't against AZT. But the whole point of what I was doing was to get the parents networking with each other. So I'd get midnight phone calls. He's throwing up, he's got this, he's got that. And I'd say, "Well, how do you feel about going to the hospital?" "No, I think I'll wait till the morning." "Well, have you talked to so-and-so? Why don't you mothers help mothers? You know, why is it always professionals telling people what to do?"
It's June 5th, 2017. Why are you telling your story now?
I want to tell the story because there's always it's a good question. There's always going to be people that see problems and they moan and groan about them and they don't do anything. If you see problems with people being cut off of food and essentials or medical care, you have to do something. And especially now that I'm in North Carolina, because it doesn't have that activist lean. It has whatever happens, happens. You know.
Your experience is activist.
I did 5 years in Mississippi. I went to Wounded Knee. I went to everything, you know, People's March in California. I've been an activist all my life, and it's repeating. Everything is repeating. And I know John Lewis, and he's still out there and he's still fighting, and I'm amazed that he does that.
How did the people of North Carolina respond to you?
But when I came down here, I talked to people at the hospital. "It's all under control, Emily. Why are you bothering us? Are you HIV positive?" That's the response. You know, I went to family medicine. I talked to some of the students. I said, "You know, I have this history, and I'm just wondering what's happening, you know, with pediatric HIV and AIDS." "Oh, we've got it under control." "How old are you again?" You know, it's a dismissal, sort of, you know. But when I read that thing about Jackson, Mississippi, literally, this guy who's positive himself has got this beat-up car, and he gets a small pittance, and he's driving all over, taking people to hospitals, taking people to get food, and the people are so depressed that the guy flat out said, I hate that you came because I was going to go cop weed because that's all I'm doing today."
What would you like to be done now? You had your druthers. What would you like to be done right now?
I would like this nation to wake up to the fact that we have a second epidemic, and it's primarily in the South, and it's primarily among Black and Latino people, and there are no resources, and they're just being told, "Take your welfare check and get out of our face."
And what role do you think you can play in this?
As a resource person, that's one of the reasons I'm doing this. When I thought about doing this, I didn't want to do something that I had done like in Mississippi and stuff. I wanted to do this one thing, Just Kids Foundation. Mm-hmm. And I want it to be a model because ACT UP has a model. You know, when you came in, you knew exactly what was going to happen in the meeting. They had medical committees, they had people planning demonstrations, and the only southern thing I had was when we came down here and we were demonstrating against Burroughs Welcome. And at the international conferences, we went there and we were so frustrated with the prices that people were just kicking over tables of the drug people, and it's the same thing all over again. I want this to be a model for that.